Let's get ready to rumble!
Hello and welcome to Netflix vs. Cinema, the podcast that's sorry for leaving you high and dry with nothing to listen to, without two, enthusiastic dummies talking about film for 2 weeks? We're really, really sorry. My name is Tosin, I am the host, based in the Midlands, and joining me as always on the Isle of Wight is Sharon.
Hello.
Hi, Sharon.
Hiya.
Yes, we are we're a bit sorry, but life happened, and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened, so there were a couple of weeks where we were just kind of like, you know what, I think we should just leave it.
Yes, it did interrupt this broadcast.
Yeah.
Rather.
It does mean that we have gone from having a couple of shows where we maybe had one or at most two films to talk about to a podcast in which we have come back with four films in the cinema to talk about, which makes this a little bit of a bumper episode, which we are going to try and get through. So let's go quickly and say, so Sharon, after a COVID hiatus, what were the films that you managed to get to see in the cinema?
Okay, I got to see two smaller films, so I went sort of more the niche market. I went to see Cyrano, or as they say in the film, Cyrano, which just sounds wrong to me. So I'm still Cyrano, sorry. And I also went to see The Duke.
The Duke, yes. Jim Broadbent, Helen Mirren. And so in the cinema, I have seen over the last 2 weeks Uncharted and The Batman. And what have you seen at home?
I haven't seen as much at home. Ironically, even though I was isolating at home for 10 days, I just didn't watch anything. So I've seen one film. I've seen a film on Sky Cinema called Land.
Land. I've heard that's Robin Wright, isn't it?
Robin Wright. Starred and directed.
Sorry, what was that?
She starred and directed it.
All right, cool. I'm just trying to figure out what the order would be in and like how we would talk about things. Okay, at home, so that means I'm going to have to talk about three things. Thankfully, I have been devouring things at home, and it's one of these things where, you're like, oh, let me go into my viewing activity on Netflix and see what it is I've watched, and you're like, oh, good Lord, yeah, there's quite a few. There's quite a few different things I've watched. So some of them I will put forward, and some of them I will ask you, Sharon, what would you like to hear about? So,
okay.
And before we go any further, I usually forget to say this, but if you will listen to us for the first time, what we do is that we see a couple of things in the cinema, rate them out of 5, see things at home, rate them out of 5, and then we get back home and we see where our money has been better spent over the last 2 weeks. In this case, usually it's over a week. Over the last 2 weeks, where has the money been better spent? Has it been at cinema or has it been at home? Right. So at home, the things that I'm definitely going to talk about are the Book of Boba Fett, because I have to talk about that. The Book of Boba Fett on Disney Plus, The Farewell, which is a film that I saw on Netflix, quite good. And I'll give you a choice of the last one. You can either hear me talk about Space Force seasons 1 and 2, a show on Amazon Prime called Wolf Like Me, which stars Josh Gad and Isla Fisher, or a film with Olivia Colman directed by what's her face, Maggie Gyllenhaal, called The Lost Daughter. So what tickles your fancy? Space Force, Wolf Like Me, a romantic comedy with some supernatural leanings, or The Lost Daughter, which is based on a book. Actually, I might just have tipped the scales in the favor of that one. But
Well, because we tend to go down the drama, we tend to be a bit drama heavy. I think if we go something a bit more lighter, I'd go with Space Force.
Space Force. Okay, cool. So I will don't spare The Farewell, Space Force, and the Book of Boba Fett, but leave Wolf Like Me to another day. But there is only one place to start. I feel like there is only one place in which we can start, which is the biggest thing, the thing that is getting all the press, all the trending things, and that is The Batman. This is yet another Batman movie. I think Batman, because there's a time I used to think it was Spider-Man, who was probably the most rebooted hero. But when I think about it, it's actually Batman. You think about the Tim Burton Batmans, then you think about the fact that you had like 3 actors playing Batman, from Tim Burton to Val Kilmer. Then you had Christopher Nolan came along with his Christian Bale one. Then you had Ben Affleck doing his version, and then you had a Lego Batman, and they had a Joker movie that was kind of like on his own, doing his own thing. And I think Batman is probably the one that gets rebooted the most. And part of it, I think, is because DC have flailed in their whole thing of trying to set up their own cinematic universe. And so they just kind of go, oh no, we flailed again. We've messed it up. What do we want? What do people want to watch? Batman. Yeah, give them another Batman. I think that there is an element of that going in here. However, and so when they go with that, there's so much potential for things to go wrong. I mean, I know if Sean was here, he would talk about how much he loved Joker. Wasn't that enamored with Joker? And so there's a massive element of things that could go wrong. And I think what they have done right here is that they have chosen a filmmaker who actually has an idea of what he wants to do with Batman. So this is a film that you might have heard about. It's the one with Robert Pattinson playing Batman. It's 3 hours long, and this is a film. Yeah, it is. It is 3 hours long. I think we have to go with the headlines. We have to go with the headlines about this film. It is 3 hours long. This is the film where it has Batman in only his second year of being Batman. So it's quite a young Bruce Wayne. He's still sort of like, figuring out stuff in Gotham and all that. But this is quite frankly, it's a detective story. So when you think about things like, like maybe Heat, or when you think about like one of the David Fincher movies, this is a detective story, and they put an emphasis on Batman doing a lot of figuring out, because the bad guy in this is the Riddler. And you have the Riddler, and the Riddler's doing all these things. He's committing all these murders around Gotham of the rich and powerful. Rich and powerful, in his words, corrupt. And he's like, yeah, but he leaves all these clues, and he tends to address them to the Batman. And Batman has to figure them out, to figure out what's going on, figure out who the Riddler is, figure out who's going to come up next. And they do a lot of that in this film. And even though this film is 3 hours, but the first hour flies by. This film kicks off, and within 5 minutes, I was like, oh, okay, this is different. This Batman might actually have a reason to exist. This Batman might actually have a point of being here, and not just a rehash of the old stuff. And this film very deliberately refuses to rehash some old stuff. Like, for instance, I think one of the most filmed scenes in all of cinematic history is Batman's parents being killed. I would very happily never watch a scene of Batman's parents being killed again. It happens over, and they keep showing it again. I'm like, why do it? And this film goes, no, we're not going to show that, and doesn't show you that. And for that not showing Batman's parents being killed probably gets this film a star on its on its own, as far as I'm concerned. But I think there are a whole bunch of things like Robert Pattinson. This film is really about Batman. Bruce Wayne is hardly in the film. It's all about Batman, and he spends most of the film in the suit, spends most of the film being Batman, and he is a very good Batman. It's like it is weird.
That's not what we were expecting to hear.
No, especially, I mean, in the suit, he is such a good Batman, and this is very realistic. Gotham is very grimy. It's very, like, people used to worry about the Riddler, and people used to say that, like, something like the character like the Riddler is too ridiculous. A guy who walks around telling you riddles with a question mark on him or in his outfits. People say it's too stupid. It can't really work. And this film found a way to make him work. He's kind of like it's like a social media presence who is railing against the corruption. And I think with the world that we live in, where we've had, like, what happened in America during the Trump administration, and how you had all these people who went and attacked the Capitol on January 6th. The Riddler in this film would be one of those people. He would be one of those people inciting people because everything is corrupt and we need to burn it down. But I think it's done so well. I think Paul Dano plays the role excellently. And I just think that this is one of the best Batman films ever made.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the first hour flies by. To be honest with you, after that, it sags. So, but I kept looking at my watch, but at the beginning, it was kind of like, I was like, man, how long is this? Oh my God, an hour? An hour has gone by already. This is really, really going forward. But then it slows down a bit to get stuck into some sort of, check us out. Look how detective-y we're being and all that. There's some bits, because it has Zoe Kravitz playing Selena Kyle, who most people would know that name is usually attributed to Catwoman, but she
Yeah.
isn't really. They never say Catwoman. She is a cat burglar. She has like a mask that looks very much like a cat, but they never say Catwoman. And the relationship between her and Batman is actually quite believable. The way it goes about it, the way I think the performances across the board are brilliant. Colin Farrell plays the Penguin, but he plays the like you would be so hard pressed to know it's Colin Farrell because he's under so much prosthetics, and he still gives a really good performance even with all that on. You have what's his name, the guy who played Gollum, Andy Serkis playing Alfred. So it has a really good cast. Everybody's on there, and there is one of the things I kept noticing, and I don't notice this that often, is the music. The music written by Michael Giacchino. He has done a really, really good job because in the first, I was going, oh my god, the music's brilliant. The music, it's just drawing me in, and he has this new Batman theme that just goes dun 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 dun, and it works. And it's one of those things where you go, the music is making this. And there's some bits where the music has this sort of weird romantic flourishes that, for all the world, reminded me of 1980s Roger Moore Bond movies. I was like, you could take that musical cue and plonk it into a Roger Moore Bond movie love scene, and it would fit. And I was just kind of like, what is going on here with it? But all in all, I'll say it's a very good film. Go watch it. It focuses a lot on Batman. I think Gotham looks really good, especially I found out the bits of Liverpool and Glasgow were used to make this Gotham.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's a lot more street level. It's a lot more street level. It's about the city, and it really goes into the mindset of Batman, and it goes into why the heck does he do this. There's a scene quite early on where you have him walking into a crime scene, and the way all the policemen treat him, it's just accentuated that this guy is a weirdo who dresses up as a bat and walks around the city at night. Weirdo. and the way it's filmed.
Anyway, doesn't it?
So what was that? What was that, Sharon?
That would set a few alarms off.
Yeah. And the film doesn't shy away from that. I think this film, more than any other, says Batman is a weirdo. Why is he such a weirdo? Why does this mean so much to him? And I think it actually successfully does that. So I would give the Batman 4 out of 5.
Wow.
I would give it. It is, for my money, it is one of the best Batman movies ever made. And I say this as a big fan of The Dark Knight. This manages to stand beside The Dark Knight because it's not trying to do the same thing as what The Dark Knight did. It says it has managed to find something new to say about Batman, which is no mean feat. To find something new to say about Batman with all the different films that have been made about him and all the different reinventions. And it really made me think, there's actually, as long as you reinvent it, as long as you're going through a different area of Batman, there's still something to say. Which is unfortunate because that means we're going to get more of them. But if they're as good as this, I'm not going to complain too much. I'm not really going to complain too much. But anyway, I've used up all my time to talk about that. And now we're going to move on. I could say more of... No, that's going to be a rabbit hole. I'm going to talk about comics and how they keep reinventing Batman in the comics. And you could do that in films, but never mind. Move on. Let's go to you, Sharon. And let's go to... home watching stuff that we watched at home. So yes. You said that you saw...
It's a film called Land that was directed, and it stars Robin Wright. I don't know if it's her directorial debut or not, but it was a 2021 drama, so it has that lockdown feel about it.
There's like 3 people in the film.
There's only about 3 people in it, yeah. Literally, there's only about 3 people in it. But the basic premise of the film is our character, and again, there's not a lot of speech in it because she spends a lot of time, as I'll find out. So she's a woman who, at the beginning of the film, we know that she's experienced some sort of tragedy, and she basically wants to retreat from the world and from everything that has caused her pain, and so she decides to buy a log cabin in the mountains. And we don't know, they don't say specifically where this is, but I can only gather it's probably in like the Yellowstone region of like Northwest America, because they refer to the Shoshone tribe, and that's basically where they're from. And so she basically buys this cabin outright, and she rents a car and like a U-Haul thing to take her belongings to this cabin. And then she says to the chap who directed her up there, can you get someone to come and pick up the car and pick up the U-Haul, but I don't want to speak to them, I just want them to take this away.
Yeah.
And are you sure you're going to be isolated? It's not a good idea to be in the mountains completely isolated. She says, no, I don't want to have any contact with anyone. She throws away her phone, and basically it's just her, this log cabin, and solitude. And she has like she has like crates full of food, and she has like an axe, and she has a gun, like a hunting rifle. And basically it's her, the first half of the film is basically her learning to survive. Yeah. And she doesn't do it very well, because you may think, oh yeah, I can start growing my own food, but then all the wildlife in the area go, hey, free lunch. And so everything she tries to grow doesn't succeed. She thinks, oh, I'll just fish, and then that's fine until the river freezes over, and then the winter hits, and then there's like blizzards that last for days, and it's like, I'll just go and hunt something. And when you have a rifle in your hand and then you're looking at an animal, it's like, can I kill anything? And so she gets to that point where she's isolated she's on her own, and she's not succeeding. She's not equipped to survive. And she is on the verge of death when she is discovered by a passing hunter. And then as the film develops, it doesn't develop in the way you would expect. Like if a man discovers a woman living in the wilderness, it's going to be like, oh,
yeah.
Does not happen in this film. Let's
huddle together for warmth during the cold winter.
Yes, and it's just like, that's what I needed. I've got a broken heart. I need you to mend my broken heart. Yeah. No, they're well away from those sort of tropes that we've seen before in this sort of film, which could easily turn into like some sort of romantic fantasy. But it doesn't, like the brutal reality of trying to carve a living in a hostile environment. But then eventually, because she is just so ill-equipped, some people, they come to help her.
Yeah.
And her way of then starting to slowly to reconnect. And we then get a glimpse into why she decided to isolate in the first place. So it is a film about this one woman's journey into basically self-discovery, failure, and then sort of rebuilding a life that that she chooses.
Cool. So this sounds like it could, because there was a film called Into the Wild directed by Sean Penn, who's Robin Wright's former husband. Oh, weird.
That's right, and it's based on a real story, isn't it, about this young man who retreats further and further away. And he basically starved to death, didn't he? Or was he poisoned by eating the wrong sort of berries?
He essentially he died because he was ill prepared. Because he had this romantic idea of what was going on, but he died. I might have just spoiled that film, but never mind. So with this, it could end up being quite pretentious. It could end up like one of these things that goes, oh, modern life is rubbish. We don't need modern life. We just need to go back to nature and everything. But I think it's the kind of thing that will probably rise and fall on the performance and the sincerity of what it is that they're saying. Does it do well in that regard? I
thought it did. It's obviously a quiet film because there's obviously not a lot of speech in it, and it doesn't romanticize the nature, because if you and I, well, I'm older than you, but we grew up in the days of like Grizzly Adams, this man sort of at one with the wilderness, and all the wild animals come, and he befriends a grizzly bear, and he befriends the Native Americans who live nearby, and it's all sort of like these sort of John Denver is playing in the background, and you have that sort of like slightly sort of, he lives like a charmed life.
Yeah.
Whereas this is, you can see the actual brutality of the landscape is absolutely desperately hostile to people if you're not equipped for it. And the only way to survive is by hunting and killing and by shedding everything that's not essential.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to survive in that environment. And so it shies away from being a romantic getaway to becoming like this brutal survival, but then she discovers what is essential. And so that in our modern times, when we were forced into isolation, someone who chooses isolation and what she needed to do to sort of what was essential for her, doesn't suit everyone, but yeah, she found out what was essential for her to keep living and to want to keep living after this sort of tragedy.
All right, cool. So how many stars would you give it?
I would give it 4, actually. I thought it's not for everyone to take, because it is a quiet film. I think Sean would like it, because in some ways it reminded me, in some ways, like, we saw a film together called Leave No Trace.
Oh, yeah.
A man with his daughter, and the more he wants to retreat from society, he sort of almost like he sort of separates from his daughter because she wants to reconnect, whereas he separate and he again like keeps finding himself like it's too busy, so he wants to go ever more and more remote. So it reminded me of that a little bit, in people that they want to go off grid, but not in a romantic sort of way. But this was more of a practical, there's so much of the modern world that we just don't want to be part of anymore. We want to retreat to somewhere where we feel that we can become more real.
All right.
And so, I thought it was a challenging film, an interesting film, and had some nice things to say, but not in a sentimental way. So, I thought it was a good, worth a watch.
All right,
so
cool. Now, what you just said, that has intrigued me, because I've heard some people review this and give it 2. But if some people say 2 and some people say 4, I'm like, okay, cool. Now I want to watch it.
Yeah.
So
you would give it a 2 because there's no high point to this film. There's no drama. There's no catharsis. There's no dramatic tension. If you say it doesn't change its tone throughout the film, because often you want a high bit, you want like drama, you want tension, this is like an
even keel all the way through.
Even keel all the way through.
Did you eventually watch Nomadland?
No, I never did.
Okay, cool. Then never mind, because I think it would be interesting to compare the two of them, because on the surface they sound similar. But now we move away from home stuff and we go back to the cinema. Back to the cinema for the first thing that Sharon saw. So you saw, how do you say? You say Cyrano.
I say Cyrano because I've always heard it was Cyrano de Bergerac, but the Americans tend to say Cyrano.
Oh,
so what?
Cyrano de Bergerac. Yeah. So Cyrano. Oh, yeah. Actually, you're right. But anyway, tell us about Cyrano de Bergerac. I'm just going to say that because then I say it properly.
Yeah.
Tell us about this film.
Is a musical version of the film, but set in because we've seen they did. Steve Martin did Roxanne, which is like a modern version of it, and then Gérard Depardieu did a French.
A French sort of classic version, straightforward retelling of the original story.
Yes, so this again is it's set in the period of time, slightly heightened because I think some of the dresses I was thinking, so like a heightened version of reality with musicals. It's a musical, so expect it to be a bit out there. And so the story is basically Cyrano de Bergerac he's always been cast as an unattractive man.
Yeah.
Famously, he's always had a very big nose, and the nose that basically distorts his physical appearance. That's the first thing that you notice about him.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's made him slightly sharp, slightly sarcastic.
Well, yeah, he's had to find other ways to sort of make himself stand out or to defend himself.
Yeah, so he's not an easy man to get to know, but the object of his love is this sort of young woman, Roxanne.
Yeah.
But he doesn't believe that at one point he believes that she could love him, but then she basically falls head over heels in love at first sight with this handsome young soldier in his company, who is like the perfect male specimen. He's tall, he's handsome, he's athletic, he's perfect in every way physically.
Yeah. And
this film, the only difference is that Cyrano is played by Peter Dinklage.
Yes.
He's like a good-looking man. He's the characteristic you notice about him is that he's a dwarf.
Yeah. And
so it's his stature that you notice rather than his looks, because I've always thought he's actually quite a good-looking man. So you can say, he's ugly because he's just not. But he has got a different build. So that is the thing that has sort of separated him from the sort of the usual crowd in this particular film. Yeah. And so in this film, the story is that because Christian, who's the object of her love, is basically inarticulate.
Yeah.
Doesn't speak fluently and he doesn't write fluently and he doesn't really express himself with any sort of depth of or seemingly without any real depth of emotion to his words. Whereas Cyrano is a wordsmith. He can conjure images with his words. He can create moods. He can draw pictures with his words that create this sort of feeling of the depth of his love that he feels for her. And so because Christian cannot speak these words that he wants to express to woo this woman, Cyrano does it for him. He writes the letters, he gives him the speeches to say, he woos her.
Yeah.
It's what but it's his own emotions, but he's just giving them to Christian to sort of win this fair maid's hand. And it's done through song and through dance and through expression. And then while all this is going on, there is a war being fought in their region, and they are both soldiers. And so, and there is a very wealthy duke who has his eye on the fair maid. And so there's like this sort of love quadrangle, really, because there's like 3 men after her.
Yeah. So,
and, yes.
So it's good because it's a bit of a classic story, and I think that it's one of those stories that you've seen elements of it show up in all sorts of different areas. I'm pretty sure that there's an episode of The Simpsons that sort of like, riffs on Cyrano de Bergerac.
It's been out there a long time.
Yeah, it's been out there for... And so it's kind of like whenever you get a new Shakespeare, the question is like, you have the story and everything like that. But A, is there a reason to make this film now? And do the changes that they make work? And B, is it done well?
See, I've never really liked this story.
Okay.
And because it's the element of deception.
Yeah.
That I have never been comfortable with that, because I'm thinking, in a modern parlance, I'm not sure if I've got this right in the right context, but in modern parlance, is it called catfishing? Where someone, the photograph of someone else to then draw someone in. So,
that's a good point. Cyrano de Bergerac is just like old school catfishing. Yeah.
So that element I've never been comfortable with, even before with this modern phenomena of like, you get this strapping handsome chap to send you like a friend request on Facebook when basically he really just wants to steal all your money. Whereas I don't think there's no sort of inherent dishonesty in this, as in what they're trying to do. But part of me is like, it's just not right. That you're trying to deceive this woman into believing that these words are coming from this man when they're actually not.
Yeah.
And even though he says, "Oh yeah, I love her," but I just can't say it. It's like saying, "Well, are you being fair to any of you?" And I think that does come out in the film, which is what redeems it for me, is the fact that, without giving sort of spoilers, I think most people know how this story goes. The fact that they acknowledge that in the film, to me, was just like, I'm glad they've acknowledged that.
Now I can enjoy this.
Deeply uncomfortable, thinking, well, you're just deceiving her. It's not right.
Yeah.
So I thought they redeemed itself in the way the storytelling was done. It was accomplished. It was enjoyable. The music, I thought there was a couple of really excellent songs. There was one song I was trying to think. I'm just going to look up. I've got the cast details here because I keep saying his name wrong. I know exactly who he is. Glenn Hansard. I keep wanting to call him Greg Hansard, but Glenn Hansard has a cameo in it where he's one of the soldiers and he has a song, and that basically was the best song in it.
All right.
But there was a few songs that I think if I heard them again, they would probably sort of go. But I found them a little bit forgettable. They had it's a modern musical. They're all going to be like very nice and very jolly, but you're going to forget them more or less as soon as they've moved on to the next song. You're going to forget about it.
Oh, so Glenn Hansard, he's the guy from Once.
Yeah, the guy from Once.
Oh yeah.
As soon as he started singing, I was like going, it's him. It's him. And I kept thinking, Greg? No, when he's singing, I'm thinking, what's his name? Is it Greg? And then it's Glenn Hansard. But yes, so that was the best song in the whole thing. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good version. It's a good musical. Again, I think the more you heard it, probably one of the songs become a bit more memorable, possibly. But there were no instant grabbers.
Yeah.
I thought, oh yeah, that's quite a nice tune. I don't think I'll be singing it on the way home.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I thought that about Encanto, and then We Don't Talk About Bruno happened. So.
Yeah, but I think when I was watching things like The Last Showman, The Greatest
Showman, yeah.
There was a couple of songs there I was humming as I was going home, thinking, that was a good song. So I think it can be done where there's sort of.
Well, the Greatest Showman. There was a song in the trailer that you were humming for ages.
Yeah, before it even came
before the film even got released. So.
Yeah. So I think they probably could have done with maybe some more punchy songs. But no, I thought they did it well. So for me, I enjoyed it, but I think basically it's probably still going to be a 3.
Okay.
I thought there some highlights. It was well done, but for me, the context of it still, I'm just uncomfortable with the basic story, going back to the fundamentals of the story. I'm just like uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
They did it very well. Peter Dinklage, I think he's just a class act, basically.
Yeah.
I first saw him in a film called The Station Agent.
Oh yeah.
A long time ago. I was the only person in the cinema when I went to see that. But since then, I've thought, yes, you need to keep an eye on him. And then I've watched more or less when he's appeared in really random things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I do rate him anyway as a someone to watch.
You see,
Game of Thrones aside completely, don't even factor that in. His film work, he's just got some really interesting things he's done.
I agree. And the thing is, I fear that this film might go the way of The Station Agent for me, because The Station Agent is one of those films that I heard about when it was released. Everybody raved about his performance, and I was like, yeah, I've got to see that. Never seen it.
Never seen it.
And Cyrano. Well, I'm confused now. But the thing is, the thing with this is that I feel like it's a film I want to see, but I think I'm not going to see it in the cinema. I don't think I'm going to be able to watch it in the cinema. And it's not until it gets onto and we'll see what happens then. But I do want to see this. I do want to see this. Oh, I think someone's trying to come in here and join the podcast.
Come and say hello. But I would say I'd give it 3. I'd give it 3 stars, but a solid, good. Could go higher 3, but definitely a 3.
All right, cool, a 3. Oh,
got a little guest presenter.
Someone's just walked into the room. Someone's just trying to show off her walking. Come here. You want to come here? All right, come here. Oh, you want to see Auntie Sharon? Come on.
I need to see that baby. Baby's home.
Come see Auntie Sharon. Come see Auntie Sharon. We're gonna have to let you go soon because you're about to try and pull out all of the cables. Try to pull out all the cables. All right, cool. So
I'd give it 3. Definitely a 3.
Okay, a 3 for you. Pronounce the name of the film.
I would. It's Cyrano is how they've said it in the film, but I would say Cyrano.
Cyrano. Okay, cool. So 3 stars for Cyrano. Bye, Kemi. I'll come hug you soon. All right, cool. Now we go back to Netflix and Friends, but Disney Plus to be exact. To go with something that was much hyped, before it was released. And this was the Book of Boba Fett. And as the title might suggest, this is based on the character of Boba Fett, who, as far as I'm concerned, inexplicably has had a massive following and has been seen as one of the coolest characters in the Star Wars pantheon, even though he does nothing.
Turns up, does he? Ooh. Yeah.
He sort of turns up, stands there, says he's no good to me, dead, and then gets knocked into a hole in the ground. And quite frankly, for me, if that was the last we ever saw of Boba Fett, I would have been happy with that. I had absolutely no, but I didn't see the Star Wars movies for the first time in the West. I saw them in Nigeria, and I was just kind of like away from all of the hype that came around them. And it was only years later that I found out that there was all this massive hype about the character of Boba Fett that seemed to center solely around the fact that the guy had a backpack, or not even that he had a backpack, that his toy had a backpack, and that's the only thing I can bring it down to. And so they made this show, The Book of Boba Fett. They've had The Mandalorian. They've had 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, and Boba Fett shows up in The Mandalorian. And at the end of The Mandalorian season 2, they said, tune in next for The Book of Boba Fett. And they set up this whole thing of Boba Fett. Next thing, we're going to go look at Boba Fett. And I am pleased to say that this show, once and for all, validates my original assessment about Boba Fett. I think this show this should be the end of the argument that with Boba Fett there is no character, there is no story, and unfortunately because I quite like Temuera Morrison, there is no performance there of Boba Fett. This show is dull. It is dull as dishwater. And they start off by going in all sorts of knots, trying to explain. Like, this show spends the first couple of episodes trying to explain why it exists. It's like, oh yeah, the last time you saw Boba Fett, he got knocked into this pit that sucks, that digests people for 100 years and no one's ever escaped. But no, he's still alive. But let's try and show you why he is alive. We'll explain to you why he's alive. Oh yeah, when he went in there, this happened and then that happened, and then they give this explanation of why he's still alive, and you're like, that doesn't hold water. I'm sorry, no, it doesn't hold water. And so then they have this horrible thing where in the modern day he has gone to Tatooine and he is becoming like he's taking over from Jabba the Hutt's business, where he's trying to become like sort of like a mob boss in Tatooine. Why? Never really explained. And then they keep going into this flashbacks of, after he somehow miraculously survived that thing, and this is what happened to him next. And you're just kind of watching it and you're going, I don't care. I don't care. And because obviously I started off not thinking Boba Fett was that great a character, not understanding why there's such a big noise made about Boba Fett, I just didn't. Yeah, Kemi, me too. That's exactly the way I felt about him. So it's like, they start off with, and so I know I started off from a point of view of probably not going to like this. I'm probably not going to like this, but they weren't doing anything to make me care. And from what I've seen from a whole bunch of other people talking about exactly the same thing, there is nothing in this to make you care. This is what I feared, because I remember the Rise of Skywalker came out. I hated that. And then Mandalorian, I did not watch it for ages because I just feared that Star Wars was over. Star Wars was done with. There was nothing else to do there. I watched the Mandalorian and I thought, oh wow, maybe there is something to do there. And Book of Boba Fett has taken me back to, no, this is a dead IP. There is nothing in here. It's just people flogging a dead horse because they have Star Wars and they're going to try and make something else to make us spend money on it, but it's rubbish. So yeah, and by the time you get to the finale, they have a battle that makes no tactical sense. And I know people might say, well, it's a space opera, but it's still got to make some sort of sense within the world. Why would you do that? Why does one character who is supposed to be key to this whole thing disappear for pretty much the entire battle because she's going to go off and do something and going to bring back some help, but she disappears for the entire battle? And then it's at the end, there's this scene where they kind of go, this scene feels like all for all the world, like somebody went, oh yeah, we forgot about her. Let's make a scene to say that she was doing something cool somewhere else while all that was going on. And there is, people talk about this, and I agree. A lot of people sent me messages before I watched it and said that it felt like a 5-year-old playing with his Star Wars toys. Like the plotting of it felt like, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? And if this person uses the Force, and this person rides that, and that person, oh yeah, that could happen. And it's just bobbins. It's just absolute bobbins. So I did not enjoy this. I watched all 7 episodes, and one of my friends, Ali Silva, was like, well, why you keep watching? I was like, because I live in hope. I live in hope that something, even though it starts off bad, might get good. But
sometimes you get one episode that just turns everything around.
Oh, and you do have one episode that threatens to turn everything around. And this is the thing I'm talking about. You have one episode that threatens to turn everything around. And making my point for me again that with Boba Fett there is no character and there is no story there. There is no character or story with Boba Fett. The one episode that everybody universally agrees is the best episode and gets you interested again does not have Boba Fett in it.
Oh. What's that doing then?
Yeah, I know. And so I just feel like, okay, now I feel if the only reason they made this show is so that all the Boba Fett fanboys can shut up and stop talking about how great he is, because he is not great. He is rubbish. He's a stupid character. Then this show has played a role. But apart from that, it's rubbish. It's a 2 for me.
2. My thing.
All right, cool. Yeah, glad I got that off my chest. Good old rant. And now, we'll go back to the cinema and I'll talk about Uncharted. Now, Uncharted, I think I'll go through this really quickly. Now, Uncharted is based on a video game. Based on a video game which was on the PlayStations, and these video games were highly, highly influenced by films. Especially, I would say, the Indiana Jones movies. they were highly influenced by the Indiana Jones movies. So, I just realized I'm going to be talking a bit. I'm going to do this one quickly. So it's this is a film that is being made about a video game that was inspired by Indiana Jones. So I was worried that this film is not going to be anything but a sub Indiana Jones. It's going to be kind of trying to be Indiana Jones, but not really. And that is kind of what happens. It's kind of what happens. You have Tom Holland, who is, obviously, he's one of the biggest stars in the world right now. He is extremely charming. You have Mark Wahlberg, and Sharon, you called it. You said that they were going to do this sort of like old guy, sort of young, precocious person, and that's what they do. So Mark Wahlberg is the older one, and they keep making jokes about the ages and the relative ages and what they know or don't know and all that sort of stuff. And this one calls that one grandpa. This one calls this one makes jokes about this one whether he's going to start shaving. And they have that thing that goes back and forth. The plot, who needs to know the plot? All you know is that these two guys, something happens, they meet up, they start chasing some treasure around the world, and things happen. Now, the thing that I feel that the Indiana Jones movies, at least the first three, they have this kind of magic about them where you get taken into the world that they're in. And when they start talking about their holy, well, in history, this person did this, or in history, the Ark of Covenant, blah, 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 or the Holy Grail, they come up with something that sort of brings you in. And this, when they come up with their reason of the treasure, of what happened to make the treasure be there, and why they're trying to chase it around, and the MacGuffin of, we need this cross because this cross isn't actually a cross, but it's actually a key. It just feels very mechanical. It feels very mechanical, and it feels as if there is no reason for this thing to exist other than we want to get from here to there. And even the plan of because it's supposed to be about these sort of like Spanish, I guess the conquistadors, or if that's how you say it, who found the treasure but hid it somewhere, but then they put a map somewhere, and you're going around this whole town, and in this whole town, I think it's supposed to be Barcelona, and in Barcelona they've done this, then they put it, and you put it, but you start, as you're watching it, you're going, okay, this is just a bit by the numbers. It's kind of a go to A, go to B, go to E. There's no, it's like when it's like the Batman, for instance, where you actually see some detecting and some figuring stuff out. There isn't really any figuring out here. It's just kind of like, it just seems like dumb luck of just falling into things and going into things and things that they figure out that you go, hang on, wait, that's convenient. and then you go, but how did they figure that out all those years ago, all those centuries ago? How did they figure that out to do? Did they have that? And it just kind of makes you go a little bit, okay, fine, it's a bit so it ends up being a bit of a 3-star thing. There's bits of it where there's fan service, there's some set pieces which are done from the game. But the point is that even the set pieces, I feel like if you're going to do something like this, because the whole point about the game is that people say the set pieces in the game blow your mind. The set pieces in the game make you go, wow. And so they just replicate the set pieces in the game. But I'm like, that's already been done. If this film had done something with the action where it had gone a little bit more out there, a little bit more blow your mind, if they'd gotten like the stunts team from The Raid to do some of the action scenes, it might have a reason to exist. But at the moment I would say, not really. It's inoffensive enough, but it's Indiana Jones's crown is safe. I'll give it a 3 out of 5. And okay, me again. Well, going back to Netflix. Okay, so and now we're going to talk about something that was on Netflix and something that does not do all those things. Something that is really, really good. I'm going to spoil this review by saying I really like this. It is a film called The Farewell. Now, you may have heard it's directed by a lady called Lulu Wang. It stars Awkwafina. And the whole idea behind it is that you start off and you meet Awkwafina, and she is American. She's an American of Chinese descent. So can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. I keep getting like little sort of like things, crackles. So she's an American of Chinese descent, and you meet her. She's like 30 years old. She's living in New York, but she's having a phone call with her grandmother, who is in China. And from the way this is done, it shows that you get the idea that she has a phone call with her grandmother every day. So she has this phone call with her grandmother every day, saying, how are you doing, what's going on. Her grandmother is in the hospital, but her grandmother isn't telling her that she's in the hospital. She's like, grandmother, what's that noise in the back? Oh, I'm just at your auntie's house, don't worry about it, and all that. And it turns out that her grandmother has contracted cancer and has been given 3 months to live. So it's terminal. She's been given 3 months to live, and the entire family. So her parents find out about it. Her uncle, who left China and lives in Japan, finds out about it. And she gets home, and her parents are like, "Oh yeah, we're going to China." It's like why? "Oh, we're going there for a wedding." And we're like, "Who is it? Your cousin? He's getting married." And it's like, "Really? If he's getting married, why does Dad look so sad?" And eventually, the truth comes out that her grandmother, who they call Nai Nai, is dying. But in their culture, they don't. If somebody's dying from cancer, they have this belief that if you tell somebody about that they die from cancer, it's the cancer that kills them or the knowledge that kills them, because they just stop living their life. So they don't tell the person that they're dying from cancer, but they come up with an excuse for everybody to come around so they can see this person one last time before it. So what happens is her cousin, who is in Japan, has been going out with this Japanese girl for 3 months. And so they go, yeah, they're going to get married. And so they use that as an excuse to get everybody back to China to see Nai Nai before she dies. And she's like so happy the whole family's back, and she loved the fact that. And but the girl Billy, she is like, but we should tell her. And people are like, no, we don't think you should come. We don't think you should come over. She's like, what do you mean I shouldn't come? It's like, we don't think you should come because you can hide your emotions and you are going to blurt it out and you're going to spoil the whole thing, and it's going to be really obvious to her that she's dying. So she ignores them and goes over to China anyway. And it's all about the dynamics between this family as they're trying to navigate this whole thing, and they're trying to say goodbye to their grandmother without saying goodbye because she's not supposed to know. And I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I thought it was brilliantly acted. I thought that the actress who plays the grandmother is brilliant. I thought she was just brilliant. And I thought Awkwafina carries the film really, really well. And you get these scenes where you can just sort of see these characters internally struggling with this, because even her dad is like, this is what we do in China, but he's been in America for a while, and he's like, but in America we couldn't do this. This would be illegal. It would be illegal to not tell her. Like, they even go to the point where there's a scene where they intercept her results from the hospital and they change them before she's seen them so that she doesn't find out that she has cancer. And it's just such a lovely portrait of the family. And it really, one of the things I was watching, I just ended up going, you know what? I don't think family's supposed to live across the world. I don't think family's supposed to be apart. I think family's supposed to be together. And it really gave me that sort of like feel about it. And there's some of the final scenes of the film just absolutely would break your heart. Yeah, just absolutely break your heart. And then there's a twist at the end. That I don't think you will see coming. So all in all, The Farewell, I thought was a brilliant film. I thought it was, and I can understand everybody who said it was one of the best films of the year that it was released in. The Farewell is excellent. Go watch it on Netflix. 4 out of 5 stars. Right, cool. That's enough of me.
I think maybe Sean has seen it. I just see it sounded slightly different.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he has seen it. I mean, the film is mostly in Chinese, to be honest, with some English. It's mostly, and that was one of the reasons why I put it off for a while, because I was kind of like, I need to be able to read to follow this story, and I need to be in the right sort of frame of mind, and oh my God, I've got a baby that I'm trying to sort out like that. So, but you need it. All right, cool. So now we go back to cinema and we go to The Duke. So Sharon, tell us about The Duke.
The Duke it's a British film based on a true story set in 1961. And it is a story of when, as often happens, when a work of art is in danger of going abroad, sometimes the British government buy it to preserve something for the nation. And this is referring to a portrait of the Duke of Wellington. He of Battle of Waterloo and the Napoleonic Wars, and he was like the defeater of Napoleon. He was painted by Goya, and it's quite a famous painting. I don't think it's actually the best painting of the Duke of Wellington, but it's a very famous painting. And it was in danger of going out of the country. So the government in 1961 raised £140,000 to save it for the nation. And then it was displayed in the National Gallery. And it's our hero of the film. and in his own small way, as in basically he's completely inept at it. Yeah, he's a bit of a social campaigner, and his bugbear is to say that the elderly and war veterans, this is based in 1961, should have a free television license. The story goes that the film progresses that basically he goes to London to see if he can petition the newspapers and petition Parliament his campaign about free television licenses, and basically no one wants to know. So he decides to break into the National Gallery and steal the Goya, which he does, and he takes it back to his home in Newcastle. Yeah, and he then proceeds to write to the Home Office and write to various people saying that I have got the Goya, I'll give it to you. I'm not stealing it. I don't want anything from it, but I think you should give me that £100,000 should be used to spend money on the license fees for old people. And basically, it's quite a long story short. He basically ends up handing himself in eventually with the painting, and he goes on trial. And then you have this sort of quite a classic trial, basically, where his defense is basically that he didn't actually steal it because he never intended to keep it. He was only ever borrowing it to highlight this social injustice. And the film is basically about what happens to him, and it sort of builds his picture around his life that, there's no theft because he didn't intend to keep the portrait. He was only borrowing it the same way, we would borrow anything and maybe be delayed in giving it back.
So now the thing is, when you're describing that, the phrase "none more British" comes to mind.
Yeah.
In that, it feels like this couldn't be a more British, more British eccentric story if you tried, especially because it's based on a true story, where the bones of the story are real. Actually, did happen. That he did take the Duke. He did go up and he did have all these ideas. Obviously, it stars Jim Broadbent, and if you wanted to make a character in a film lovable, it's hard to go wrong by after you've cast Jim Broadbent, especially with Helen Mirren playing his wife.
And Matthew Good playing his solicitor. It's like tick tick tick, all these British drama.
It's like heartwarming British drama. And I know that this is a film that has been delayed for ages because I've been seeing the poster for this film in the cinema I go to in Redditch, since Christmas 2000 since Christmas 2020.
Wow.
Yeah, the poster for The Duke has been up on the wall since then. It was supposed to come out. It didn't come out. It was supposed to be released. That it hasn't, and then finally it's here. And I think this is a film that I really want to see, probably more than most right now. I really want to see The Duke. I want to see what it says. So I want to see what it has to say. But anyway, how many stars would you give it? What would you think of The Duke?
I enjoyed it. I mean, it is very British. It is of its type. So I would give it a good 3. But I still think it does what it's supposed to do. It delivers. It's entertaining. It's interesting. Makes you think about some things. So I enjoyed it. Yeah, definitely a 3.
Okay, so a 3 for The Duke. Jim Broadbent and Helen Mirren. I hope that they are just as delightful together as they are in my dreams.
Yeah.
Right, so we're going to our final thing this week, and we go back to Netflix, and this is a Netflix original called Space Force. So Space Force is I would say it's a much maligned comedy series from Steve Carell, and so it's a much maligned comedy series from Steve Carell that was released on Netflix in the aftermath of, I believe, Trump saying something about wanting to militarize space and wanting to be like the greatest force in space. And I think that's where this whole thing came from, Space Force. So the first season has this whole satirical vein running through it where they keep talking about the president. They never mention the president by name, but they do say things like, oh my God, the president's about to send up another tweet, or you have displeased the presidents, therefore you don't get any ice cream this week, or something like that. And it kicks off with Steve Carell, who is a 4-star general, and he's going into a meeting of the Joint Chief of Staffs because he believes he's about to be given the role of Air Force. He's going to be made the role of Air Force because there's another guy who is in charge of the Air Force who he doesn't like, and he doesn't think is good at his job. But then when he goes in there to say, no, you're going to be given the role for Air Force, you have Lisa Kudrow, who plays his wife, and Lisa Kudrow is kind of like, oh yeah, don't worry, it's going to be fine, and he's there with his daughter, and they think everything's going to be good because they're going to live in Washington, D.C., and they're going to get to the upper echelons. But then they find out that he's been given Space Force, and Space Force runs out of Colorado, out of a back end of a place called Wild Horse, Colorado. So the next time you see them, they have relocated to Colorado. Lisa Kudrow's in jail for some reason, and they never tell you why she's in jail. They never tell you what she did to end up in jail. His daughter's not happy about it. He's running like this whole... He's trying to keep Space Force together, and you have John Malkovich, who plays the lead scientist, who is always coming up with... talking about the science, and he's talking about the military, and he has the president yelling at him because the president sees it as like, we've got to go in there, militarize space, and the scientist sees it as a scientific endeavor. And so there's this whole thing where there's some satire in it and there's a comedy in it, and I think because the first season was made in the shadow of Trump, the commentary that a friend of mine, Yatish Palmer, who watched it, because everything I heard about this show said it wasn't that good. Yatish watched it and he actually said, I quite like it. So I was like, okay, cool. I trust him more than I trust some random critic. I'll watch it. So, and he says that he thinks in the first season, the satire gets in the way of the comedy because you can see that, quite frankly, the people who made this show don't agree with Trump, and they keep having to point out how absurd some of the stuff that you would have to deal with if you were trying to do a Space Force is. When it focuses on the comedy, like the second episode, there's a whole bit where they okay, this is going to sound crazy, but they are trying to get a chimpanzee to fix a satellite in space.
What could go wrong with that?
Yeah, I know. It gets absurd. It gets absurd, and it gets absurd quick. What all these? But I think the standout thing, and the reason I would say watch Space Force, is for John Malkovich. John Malkovich is just brilliant in this. He's worth the price of admission alone. Just watching John Malkovich play this scientist who has had it with all this nonsense around him and doesn't have much time for anything. You don't really get, most of the characters don't really get a look in apart from Steve Carell and John Malkovich. I can understand why some people didn't quite like it but I actually think it's quite good. I think it's quite a good show. I think it's the second season, because the second season was obviously made when there was a different presidential administration in, because they chuck all that stuff about talking about it, and they just focus on the Space Force thing itself. It's kind of neither here nor there. There's only 7 episodes, and there's some storylines that get picked up and they never get put down again, or they never actually they don't go anywhere. You're like, wait, what about that? And it also does one of the tropes that I think is one of the laziest tropes. So obviously you have a husband and wife. She's up in jail, and they keep telling you that she's going to be in jail for decades. They never tell you what it is that she did, but you know she's going to be in jail for decades. And there's a discussion they have about what that means for a marriage towards the end of the first season that I think is a really interesting conundrum that they raise. That even had me and my wife saying, what would you do in that situation? And made it a real sort of, and I was like, oh, this is actually, it's not going for an easy answer. But then in season 2, they go for the easy thing, which is out of nowhere. There's just somebody gets served divorce papers, seemingly for a cheap joke, which seems to contravene everything that has gone beforehand. And I was like, what? Why did you do that? And so the second season is weird because you don't know if it was cut short because of COVID. You don't know if something else happened. But there's just something that feels like the second season's incomplete. Like you haven't finished an arc. You haven't finished the story. It just kind of stops. So all in all, I liked it, but I would have to give it a 3 out of 5. I'm not sure if they're going to make much more, but I know that there's a lot of people who are happy for it not to, because there's articles that say things like, why has Netflix canceled all this good stuff, but still they are paying to make Space Force? and I thought Space Force was all right. I thought it was all right. It's not the best thing. It's no Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but I thought it was quite good. Right, so at the end of all that, Sharon, What do you think? What do you think has come of our head? Is it Netflix or cinema this week?
I think it's cinema.
You think it's cinema?
Yeah, because I think we had that too on the Netflix side. So I think, even though, I probably think cinema picked it this week.
Well, I am pleased to inform you that we have a dead heat.
Wow.
Yeah, we had a dead heat. So cinema kept up like a sort of consistent bit of quality going through. So we had the 4 with the Batman, but then everything was a 3-3-3. And the Book of Boba Fett threatened to sink Netflix and all that. But Land and The Farewell raised it up with their 4s. Said, no, we will not go down today. So it is a dead heat. This week, our money, or over the past 2 weeks, over the past fortnight, our money has been spent equally well in cinema and on Netflix.
That's good.
On average, Book of Boba Fett. I'm not getting that time back. But so until next week, where we will find something to watch, and hopefully we'll probably be back to 2 films in the cinema. It's a goodbye from me.
And a goodbye from me.
Thank you very much for listening this far. Bye.